Yeah, I mean, some of it is particularly for political information, news information, political news, and that kind of thing. One reason that we're not is because we tend to get tribal, right? So we tend to want to seek out this news that kind of validates our position and our kind of moral place that we decided to take, moral stand that we decided to take. And so we will seek out the media that helps validate that, makes us feel good. We like seeing when the other news that shows us the other side is being dumb or bad in some way, because it makes us feel better that we picked the right side. And even though it's not good for us, like it kind of makes us mad and bad for our mental health, we still go do it, right? So that's where being mindful can help, right? You can start taking a more proactive role in that and sort of like, is this really helping me? Like I feel like it's helping me, but then it's really not, right? So that can help.
Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast. I'm your host, Gary Scott, and today my guest is David Beckmeyer. Hey, David.
Hey, Gary, good to see you.
Yeah. I knew we were going to get this together. I knew we were going to figure this deal out. But, guys, real quick, I'm just going to read David's real nice little introduction here. So today we're joined by David Beckmeyer, the host of the Outrage Overload podcast. David is an expert in political polarization and media literacy, focused on reducing toxic outrage and promoting civil discourse. With insights from social psychology and communication studies, David helps listeners understand the mechanisms behind outrage media and offers practical strategy for fostering unity and understanding in a divided world. We're in a divided world?
Some
Who
people say,
who knew? Who knew?
yeah, who knew?
Well, I can't wait to jump into this. I was looking forward to this. We had a little hiccup before. I was looking forward to this because this is a topic that's near and dear to me. I'm just trying to figure this whole craziness out. But before we get started, David, like I said, with the What If You Could podcast. So I start off by asking all my guests, Mr. David Beckmeyer, farmer by the river, farmer by the stream. What is your what if you could?
I think I'll go today with what if you could use media more mindfully, and maybe it's the one that we can chat about, 'cause I think that can take us in a lot of different directions.
Well, I think they do use the media mindfully. I think everything that they do with the media is mindful, from commercials to the propaganda to the fake news to the all of it. It's all.
Right,
I
but
don't
are
think
we as
any of it
consumers
is.
being mindful, right? That's the question, right?
That's a good question. But you're going to have to answer that for me. You're the expert. Are we be well, I don't believe we are. So I'll be jaded. I'll play bad cop.
Ye
Why aren't we mindful in our viewing in our selections?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is particularly for political information, news information, political news, and that kind of thing. One reason that we're not is because we tend to get tribal, right? So we tend to want to seek out this news that kind of validates our position and our kind of moral place that we decided to take, moral stand that we decided to take. And so we will seek out these the media that helps validate that, makes us feel good. We like seeing when the other news that shows us the other side is being dumb or bad in some way, because it makes us feel better that we picked the right side. And even though it's not good for us, like it kind of makes us mad and bad for our mental health, we still go do it, right? So that's where being mindful can help, right? You can start taking a more proactive role in that and sort of like, is this really helping me? Like I feel like it's helping me, but then it's really not, right? So that can help. And so then, then how do you go about doing that? Like, but I would say that's the biggest why, is because we sort of seek out, well, I mean, and also there's folks like me that are out there trying to talk about media literacy and all that. But, we have to remember that for a lot of people, they barely consume news at all, right? They mostly are just passive. So the only stuff they get is, maybe flowing through their social media feeds, which in a lot of ways is the worst, because now it's kind of your algorithms and your engagement algorithms that are feeding you, and so they're just going to keep you kind of on the edge of your seat all the time, and afraid and angry, because not because they're trying to keep you afraid and angry, but just because when engagement is the goal, they have figured out that that's the stuff that keeps people engaged. Most of us.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, I think people go, I'm outraged. So if I'm outraged on the far left, I'm going to watch whatever MS is called now. If
Right.
I'm outraged on the far right, I don't know if Fox is even far right anymore. I think it's kind of sliding a little bit, but whoever's on the far right, well, who's on the far right? Newsmax or
Yeah, I
whatever. I
think
don't
like a
even.
Newsmax or OAN or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
so those guys
and
I
for the
guess
most
would be
part, Fox
far
as
right.
well. But yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know how to. I haven't watched Fox News in so long. I don't even know. And then you've got the semi left, pretty not hard left like the MS, but you got CNN. But so we feed it, right? We go, well, I need more. I need to be more outraged. I'm not outraged enough. So I'm going to put on MSNBC and I'm going to, first thing in the morning, and I'm going to have it on all frickin' day or Fox, right? I mean, we're going to feed our addiction to the anger and the outrage.
Yeah, and we don't really even know we're doing that. We think we're becoming more informed, we just want the news. We want, but yeah, it is feeding us it is feeding into our sort of moral superiority about the other side, right? It's feeding us all the bad stuff they do. And we don't really, we don't appreciate how much it's doing that. And and it can be hard because you kind of want to see it, like you feel good for a moment about that, but we also know that long term it's not good. Like you're just getting stressed out all the time, and also you're not really able to engage effectively with your political rivals because you have this caricature view of them. Like you all think they're like what Fox News tells you they are, or what MSNBC or what is it, MS Now or something tells you they are.
Right.
And they're not really. If you go out and talk to your neighbors, you'll see that they're not really like that for the most part. You run into people occasionally that might be sort of like that, but that's not most people. That's definitely the exception. Most people, even if they have different, views than you or want to vote differently than you, they probably aren't like what Fox News or MSNBC is showing us, right? So, um, and so that just kind of is another piece of this spiral that we get that gets us more worked up. Then we want more of it. Then we get more worked up. Then we want more of it. So yeah, it's kind of a spiral. And so in terms of what can you do about it is one thing. Like if you really feel like I want to watch some of that kind of content, you could actually kind of do what some people talk about, kind of the idea of inoculation a little bit, but sort of go into it just reminding yourself, I'm going to watch Rachel Maddow. Oh yeah, she's going to try to make me mad, isn't she? Right? That's kind of what she does, right? So okay, if you're going to watch it a little bit, at least go in with that attitude and then kind of remind yourself, oh yeah, she's doing the thing where she tries to make me mad, or whether it's Tucker Carlson or whoever. They're all going to kind of try to do that. So you may want to watch them because you still kind of like to know what that side is saying, or you want to be some of that. But you can protect yourself a little bit from it by starting with that. Like, oh, I'm going to explicitly acknowledge that they're going to try to make me mad, right? That can help a little bit. Another thing I recommend that I do for people is, try to go deep rather than wide. Like you talked about turning the TV on, just watching it all day. They're only going to tell you sort of the same 5 stories 100 times, right, all day long, pretty much. And and so you really aren't getting that much depth in anything, and a lot of talking heads that aren't. It's not even really news. That's just talking heads. There ought to be some kind of a line on the bottom what's news and what's not news, because for the most part, all those shows are commentary. They're not really news at all, right? Um,
Yeah.
but so sometimes what I recommend is like if there's a topic you're concerned about, go deep on it for a few days or a week instead of just trying to understand everything that's going on in the world, because that can be overwhelming. And if you go deep on a topic, what we find kind of over and over, you'll learn more about it, and I don't mean sort of necessarily go deep just in your own sort of bubble. Try to go deep from quality news sources, try to get a spectrum of reasonable, see what people are saying across the spectrum a little bit from quality news sources, though. Don't just turn to the, you know, podcasters and YouTubers, which is fine. You can be informed by them too, but you might want to also intermix, some more traditional journalism and kind of mix it in and go deep on that topic. And what we see when you go deep on a topic, you learn there's more nuance than you first thought, right? Because the MS Now version and the Fox News version is very much collapsed a lot of the detail to try to have you kind of have this simple black and white, I'm right, they're wrong kind of view on it. And when you get into these issues, what you really find is most of them, at some point, you're going to start to just realize they're more nuanced, they're more complex. The trade-offs, there's different kind of trade-offs in it, and you can see why somebody might like this, and you can have a better understanding of like what how much I should like it or be mad about it or whatever, right? Because often we get really mad about it because they kind of tell us to get really mad about it. Then
Right.
when you learn more about it, you kind of go, maybe I don't need to be that mad, right? Maybe it's not that big of a deal one way or the other. And so anyway, I think that can help to go deep rather than wide sometimes. Just really dive into a topic, and you'll know more about it, and you won't get so caught up in just this barrage of basically headline level stuff that's all awful, right? I mean, the headlines are terrible, right? And now, but you really don't know much about that topic. You just got the headline.
Yeah. I was saved by my children, actually. Um, when I despised George Bush. Matter of fact, I still do. And I think Dick Cheney is Satan. I was so blown away when the left just started suckling up to the teat of the Cheneys. I was like, are you what? Now I know we live in an altered universe when you guys are sucking up to the Cheneys. Because Cheney's the devil. Um, so I used to purposely watch Rachel and Lawrence and all the gang over at MSNBC. And then what I would do is I'd flip to Fox just so I could yell at Sean Hannity and call him a Bush bootlicker and throw my shoe at him, so I could have more outrage because I wasn't getting enough
Yeah.
outrage. Now they've turned it way up. It was almost moderate outrage. Now it's way outrage. And then my kids said, "Dad," and they're like 8, 8 and 10.
Mouths of babes, right?
Yeah, out of the mouth, the babes are like, "Dad, why do you keep watching this stuff if all it does is make you mad?" What they don't no, they couldn't comprehend it because they were honest and they could see things because they were children, right? And I sat back and I go, you know what? You're right. I'm not going to watch Bootlicker Hannity anymore, and I'm not going to watch crazy Rachel Maddow screaming at me how I should hate everybody, including myself, because I'm white. Um, I just, I gave it up. I just gave it up. And now I've lost so many friends on the left. They all just think I'm just this MAGA thing. I'm like, dude, it's a campaign slogan. I don't know what you're so pissed off about. But yeah, so it's interesting the friends that I've lost, how deeply embedded they are in the fact that they are right and I suck. Even though they don't even know what I suck for. I'm just on that side, so I suck. But you do have to just drop out sometimes. I mean, don't you think? Sometimes, like you said, go deep, not wide. Don't just feed yourself this shit all day long. Go in, find something. Go, yeah, I want to know more about that. Let's go down the rabbit hole on that. Okay, I got both sides of that, and I'm gonna leave Crazy Town alone because life's too short. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot there, and I can relate to a lot of that too because one of the instigators for me starting this work was just that condition and seeing that in my life, in my circle, and seeing so many friends, disconnect from each other and family members basically lose touch with each other over politics, right? Over their political views. And like you say, many times it's just they don't even really understand each other's views that much, but it was enough that they, don't talk to each other. Someone's, Uncle John's not invited to Thanksgiving anymore. There's just like a ton of these kind of stories that so many people had. And that was a big driver for me to be like, what's going on here? Like, this is not good for us as a society, as humans. And so that's why I want to kind of start looking into this. So I looked at some of the research and science on it and what's happening out there, and there must be some people smarter than me looking at this, and that's what I found out there are. And so that's kind of what I do is I go out and reach out to all these scientists and researchers, and there's a bunch of people also in this kind of what's called this kind of bridge building space that I call practitioners that are kind of out there and trying to do dialogue and bringing people together to build things together and stuff like that. And yeah, and that's what was really a huge driver for me. And also another factor that you talked about your kids. My son was older, but he's a millennial, and at some point he said, "Oh, he said he got off Facebook," and I'm like, "Man, you were pretty active on social media. You left Facebook. Like, what's that about?" And we had a big conversation about it, and it was kind of this whole thing that he was finding himself just getting in fights with people for no reason over politics, like, and to where the fight, the actual message of the fight, like the content of the fight didn't really matter anymore. It was just winning. It was just kind of almost like a troll sort of mode where he was just doing all the damage he could,
Exactly.
and he's a smart kid and all that, so he's going to be able to do a lot of damage, right? It didn't even matter anymore what the content was about. And so he was smart enough to take himself off out of that loop. Um, yeah, and a lot of people get frustrated, because a lot of people do check out. And I'm definitely not saying everyone should check out, but I understand if that's what you have to do for yourself. I mean, there are people that get mad when people say they've kind of checked out because they feel like, well, you have a civic duty and and all this, you have to stay informed. And that's true. We have our civic duty, but we also have a duty to ourselves and our family. So, and I think that comes first. So I do encourage, like, if you can find a way to re-engage and build resilience and get involved in it, I do encourage that, but I also understand when like taking yourself out of the loop is the best answer. And because you can't do anything if you're just on, if you're just on fire all the time, basically.
Yeah, I just do my own research. I have friends that have left me that are on the left, and they've given up on me because I'm so uneducated. Because they say, "Well, what do you watch?" I'm like, "Well, I don't watch anything." I mean, I'll know if we get nuked. You know what I mean? I know what's happening in the war. I'm on social media. Um, However, I choose what I want to go down the rabbit hole on. I don't run around with my hair on fire. What is the outrage of the week this week? I'm out of flags. I've kind of totally run out of pins and flags, right? I mean, I don't have any more because it's the outrage of the week. I mean, who are we writing against today? So I'm a little more selective in what I choose to spend my time on. And then I'll take a deep dive on it because that's what matters to me. I don't want Rachel or Tucker or any of these guys telling me what I need to be outraged about. I'll choose I'll select my own outrage, right? And like with your son, it's I don't remember which one of the Stoics or which one of the great guys from back in the day just said, when the argument is lost, the insults start to fly. And that's where we are. I mean, it'd be so great to have dialogue with people like we used to. In the old days, we'd sit and bat heads all the time, right? Over a beer or whatever, and then walk away, hug, and go see you later. But now it's not like that, right? It just turns to immediate outrage. Is that?
Well, and that's what a lot of this kind of bridge building community is kind of working on, right? And I'm not explicitly like in that, like I don't explicitly do the dialogue stuff necessarily. I mean, I do as a separate organization. I'm a moderator, trained moderator for a group called Crossing Party Line, so I do moderate those conversations. But in terms of my podcast, it isn't. That's not what we do. We more talk about the people that do that. So we bring some of that to light for others. I don't, sort of conduct those kind of dialogues and discussions. But I bring on the people that are doing it out there, like the Braver Angels of the world and the Crossing Party Lines and the other organizations like that. And we're a member of Listen First Coalition, which is, I think, over 500 organizations that are sort of working in this space to try to facilitate the exact thing you're talking about, where we used to be able to have conversation, right? And so, and it's hard when we don't practice it enough, right? I mean, social media is a terrible place. It's a terrible model for this. You can't model that behavior on social media, and you can't really even have those. It's just not a place that facilitates those kind of conversations, right? So we're using that as our kind of model to go out in real life and try to do that, and it just doesn't work that way. Like you're not going to get anywhere, and we're too close. We're too much in this kind of win lose mode all the time. Where I'm going to win, you're going to lose, rather than I want to learn, I want to understand like why you think why do we, because I try to tell people sometimes if you can attack this as, and I'm not saying this is easy. I get it wrong as much as anybody else does, but, um, I talk to people about this idea of maybe instead of like going into this conversation, like, hey, they believe this thing and I have to change them and they have to stop believing that. Instead of going in like that and saying that's your win mark, like you talked about flags, your flag is kind of I've got to change their mind. Make it more of a something that, in other words, I'm going to win, they're going to lose, or vice versa. Make it something that we both win, where make instead the goal be, I want to understand why you see it differently, right? And if we both have that goal, we can both win in that conversation, even if neither one changes how they see it, right? Like, to genuinely want to understand why somebody sees it that way. And you can still be frustrated by it sometimes. It's going to bother you, like why they see it that way. But you'll have a better understanding of them, and that will also give you a better understanding of your position on things. Like, oh, if they think that, when why Is that my whole position still whole? So I try to, have people do that. And I get that it's hard. Like when you're going to have these conversations, like I said, we don't practice it. So we don't have the skills. So I often tell people, like, if you want to start having conversations, don't start off with politics with your neighbor who thinks about things the other way. Start off, like, go bowling, or go play golf, or go do video games together or something. Just get to know each other as people first, outside of politics. And you'll see them as human, like, oh yeah, they have kids, and the kids that go to school. And sometimes if you really want to set the bar low, I'll say things like, you say they're terrible. And, and you were even talking about Dick Cheney, and I don't know how you'd answer this, but, and I ask people to say things like, okay, do you think your neighbor would pull your kid out of a burning car? Like, right. And it's a pretty low bar, but I mean, if they'll at least do that, you have a starting place, right?
Well, I have a great cul-de-sac where I live. We have a great mix of people. There's, let's see, 8 homes on our cul-de-sac. 4 of them have American flags. One of them has the latest uh, pride flag. And I had to ask him because I go, dude, I've got a ton of gay friends. I live in freaking Palm Springs, California. There's many more gay people here than San Francisco right now because they all moved from San Francisco. I got so many gay friends. I go, a lot of my old school gay friends don't like the new pride flag. They don't even know what the hell all these things are, right? They just bring us back to 5 little colors, right? It's a lot of them are kind of getting a little pissed off about it because even the pride flag like changes every week. Like there's a new thing on it now. So his has got all the stuff. So I had to go ask him. I go, hey man, what are those extra things? And the pride flag goes, I don't know. He goes, but the city council wanted to do a thing that said, no more pride flags. We're not going to do a pride month. You can do a pride month if you want, but we're not hanging pride flags all over the city anymore. Well, this poor son of a bitch almost got his ass kicked. So to fight back, my neighbor put up a pride flag. Cool. I don't give a shit, right? But it's just funny how even those things now, even within the same communities now, people are like starting to get a little bitter because we have a really big conservative gay population, which is really pissing off. It's like the old gays are becoming more conservative, and the new gay guys are like super, super liberal, and it's causing a little bit of friction inside that community. So even stuff like that, where we're all supposed to be, why can't, like Rodney King says, why can't we all just get along, right?
Well, and I definitely do recommend that people get to know start in your neighborhood. It's a lot easier than sort of starting at somebody online 10,000 miles away, right? Get to know the people in your neighborhood, and work, go work on stuff together, like locally. Go fix the potholes or whatever. You'll get to know them a lot better. You'll see them as real people. You'll see you share, like, that we both care about the pothole. Like, hey, that's what we want to care about. But yeah, and like you were talking about, people see these signifiers and then they want to react to it. So it's like we're constantly kind of geared up for a fight. Like we're just on edge all the time. We're kind of looking for a fight almost. Like, what weird pin is that? You'll see the pin and you'll want to be mad. Then you get up to the pin and it's like, oh, it's that not the pin I thought it was, or whatever, right? But you're almost geared up for a fight, just to walk into it. I was doing tons and tons of interviews of what I call these street outrage interviews, of just man on the street type things, where it's not an expert, it's just a regular person that agreed to have one of these interviews with me, and we just talk about stuff like media diets and things like that. Yeah, I mean, people are shocked when I put myself very much in listen mode. Like, they might say some pretty extreme things, but I'm just in listen mode. I'll just hear it. Like, okay, I'll just kind of make note of it, right? And I don't push back. I don't get in big arguments. I mean, sometimes I'll try to ask for clarification, like, what do you really mean by that, and that kind of stuff. But I don't really do a lot of pushback. And it's really funny because after a little while, people are like, "What's wrong with this conversation?" Like, it's almost like, "Where's the
Where's
fight?"
the outrage?
Yeah, where's the outrage? There was supposed to be, why, and then they sometimes will also take it for agreement. Like, since you didn't push back, that must mean you agree. And I try to do it in such a way that I'm kind of neutral. I'm not necessarily agreeing with you. I'm just taking it in and accepting that's where you stand. But it's really funny that but then you see people really open up because they're just not used to it. This doesn't happen to us in real life or in a typical situation. Like, if we say something kind of controversial, we just know we might get attacked. So many times we just won't say it, for one thing. We'll just keep quiet. But, we kind of expect a Well, and some people are instigators. They go into a place kind of saying a they sang a thing just to see if they can get a rile out of everybody. But if you're not, if that's not your main objective, you still kind of expect somebody to react to it maybe. And when that doesn't happen, it actually sort of takes people like, wait, what's happened? This is weird. But then you also see them really open up, and they'll tell you more that they might not have done if you had really started pushing back right away. So, and I would say, on that, we don't actually know that much about even people we know pretty well because they're probably holding back a lot of their views because they kind of know it would trigger you and it might turn into a fight and they don't want to have a fight. So if you did put yourself in listen mode, you would learn a lot more about the people you know because they'd share stuff that otherwise they won't.
Yeah. You know what I miss a lot because I'm a real shit stirrer and I'm a smart ass. I just miss sarcasm.
Right.
Like you'll be in a thread of like-minded people, right? Everybody's has the same thoughts. They're just feeding each other's egos, right? And I'll put something in there sarcastically. It's obviously right. I'll put the rolling eyeballs or I'll put something and I'll just get shredded. And I have to go, obviously you missed the sarcasm. And 90% of the people being good people go, ah, dude, shit, you're right. I missed the now some people won't. Some people like, I think you're lying. You did
Right.
that. But 90% of the people go, dude, you're right. Nah, I miss the sarcasm, and that takes it down a notch. It takes people down to like, hey, let's just some of the shit we're fighting over is just so bizarrely stupid. It's insane. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like some people say, post a rock and say, okay, everybody go at it. It's just, it's becoming that bizarre sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, well, and like you say, with these conversations online, I mean, I participate. I should say I observe. I do a lot more observing than I'm participating these days because I just kind of like to see like what kinds of arguments are people making and where they stand and how do they interact with each other. And it's quite informing, but it's also somewhat depressing, right? And again, I also, because I've done a lot of the research, I've talked to a lot of experts, I also know that I'm not seeing a picture of what the real world looks like, right? These are the most extreme people that dominate all these forums these days, right? So you're not actually seeing the sort of more moderate voices because they've kind of dropped out. Like, why should I? I go in there and everybody, the people on the left yell at me, people on the right yell at me. Why should I even go into this? Or, I can't even get involved in this. So they just kind of have pulled themselves out. You don't see them. So who's left? It's like the extremes on both sides. So we're getting a very skewed perspective of reality there. That's not a good representation of how the real world is. And that can screw us up for out when we go outside social media and want to have interactions with real people because we think social media is a picture of how things are and it's not. But yeah, it's really interesting. I occasionally will post stuff in some of these groups and trying to sort of be in a, kind of a clarifying, kind of way and kind of in a, you know, context providing sort of way. And oh yeah, I mean, people, if you do that, people on both sides get mad at you, right? How dare you sort of not take a much stronger stance on one side or the other or whatever? How dare you bring this nuance into it? That kind of stuff. So yeah, you can see why people don't participate in this stuff because in fact, one time I posted a thing about there's something called the dignity index. And it's put out by it's a group out of Utah, and it's a mix of it was started by some conservatives, but then they brought in also some more liberal people. So they have kind of a board that's mixed, and they try to and so they've created this thing called the dignity index that rates speech. So it's on this dignity scale from dignity to uh, contempt, right? It's like a 1 to 8 scale, and eight's kind of kumbaya, and one is like you basically want to blow people up, right? So there's kind of a somewhere on that scale is where text gets rated. And I talked about this dignity index, and people got mad about that because they're like, what are you trying to control my speech? You're trying to, what do you mean I can't use like, but, and I didn't really go into it too much with them, but it's like, well, if you can't say what you have to say without, basically telling people they shouldn't live, like they should probably die, then maybe your point isn't that great. Like that's the only way you can defend your position, you know, but it's kind of funny that people got mad just about that. Like they see that as like censorship. The fact that that this group, that someone might rate your speech and say, well, I think on the dignity scale, not truth or anything else, just like, on your dignity scale and how much contempt you're offering, it's a 4 or whatever, right? Well, and they're mad about that. But it's also like, well, I can't. You're telling me I can't make my argument, But when I'm like, well, if the only way you can make your argument is by calling people bad names, maybe your argument isn't that great.
When the argument is lost, so the insults start. I'm telling you, I
Yeah,
can't remember which one of the Caesars or which one of the great Greek Stoics said that, but it's just so true. 2,000 years later. But yeah, rating dignity is racist. You know that. Don't do that. Don't rate dignity because you're telling me you're judging my. Who are you to judge my dignity? There isn't anything that you cannot fight over
right.
anymore, and that's why you know I literally have family members that I can't talk to. I'm like, dude, I swear, I've known you for 40 frickin' years. When are you gonna let this shit go, man? It's like, why do you have to just go there? You know what I mean? It's like I'll say, "Hey," they have a cabin, by we have a cabin up in Vegas. Say, "Hey, I'm gonna be at the cabin this weekend. Um, we got some snow. Are you guys gonna come up?" And the response would be, "Are you gonna wear your MAGA hat?" I'm like, like, wh I I don't even know if I have a MAGA hat, first of all, but why does that have to be your response? It's like, I just won't." And when he hears this, well, he won't listen to this, but if he did, he'd know exactly who I'm talking about. But it's just we're so triggered. We're so triggered. We're looking to jump into that. And like I said, whether it's sarcasm or it's just the smallest thing, it just seems like people just are so triggered to want to defend their side as if they're our sides. It's the most bizarre thing.
Right. Yeah, we definitely have fallen into this kind of tribal mode, and also this kind of there's kind of a purity aspect to it too, and some of that is almost like fear of their own side, right? Like we're afraid of our own side. So I wouldn't, if I'm on the more progressive side, I don't want to hang out with you with your hat because my friends are going to say I'm a traitor, right? And people are afraid of that kind of stuff. It's like, and that's the kind of stuff that like just, is a big driver for me starting this kind of this show because it's just like, that's the world we live in now. Like you're so afraid of your own tribe that they're going to ostracize you because you were seen next to a guy with a MAGA hat. It's wacky, right? I mean, this is where we're at.
It's crazy. Now, when you do your show, and I've watched a lot of episodes on your show, but for the people who have yet to view to sign on, a bunch of them are going to be after this podcast. But when you're doing your Outrage Overload podcast, it seems like you're really shooting for middle of the road people. It seems like you're not picking people who are taking sides. Like I think the most recent one was a dude about the research that he did. Was that on yours that the guy was doing? He was doing deep
Yeah.
dives on research and polling and stuff like that.
Right.
And I talked to a guy, interviewed a real brilliant kid who's got an actual new AI polling system that's supposed to straighten this shit out. Because let's face it, if you call my house and say, "Are you going to vote for Kamala or Trump?" I'm going to say Kamala. Oh, me and Cammy all the way because I live in California. I'm not going to tell some pollster that I'm voting for Trump. I'll be audited and toilet papered. No, I'm just not going to do it. So polling is a really interesting thing now, too. I mean, people don't even want to be honest about answering poll questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in my show, we don't talk about issues per se much. I mostly talk about sort of how we talk about issues. You know what I mean? I mostly talk about
Mhm.
the psychology of this kind of tribal stuff we're talking about, to where like I'm afraid to be around you because you have a MAGA hat or whatever, right? And kind of some of the psychology around that, and we talk about some of the political science, around kind of this election dynamics and things like that. And then like I say, I also talk with these people in the bridging kind of work where they're trying to come up with ways to, get people to come to the table and talk to each other, and some examples of that kind of stuff and opportunities for people to participate in that kind of thing, right? Because, we talk about the news media before. These kind of things aren't out there in the news. Nobody's talking, it's all bad news. They just want to tell you all the bad news. Nobody's talking about that there are hundreds, probably thousands of organizations that are trying to bring people together to have these conversations, to try it so you can talk to your relative or whatever again, right? And there's a bunch of people working on that stuff. And so I try to highlight those organizations and the opportunities for people to participate in it. And then we also talk about disinformation, misinformation, and things like that. So we're more meta. I'm not a politics debate show or anything like that. We don't typically, I mean, once in a while, if there's something really in the news, I'll do like a special episode and I'll have a particular episode, a particular expert, but it's usually a political science expert, right? It's not a partisan expert. It's a political science expert that can try to explain, the pluses and minuses of this issue that's kind of out there, in hopefully a pretty neutral way. Every once in a while, I bring on partisans, and I make it very clear that this person's a partisan and we don't endorse him, but I want to see what they're going to say about it. I brought on a candidate that was running for the DNC, and said, just to get his position on, like, well, a lot of people were confused about what does the Democratic Party stand for. So I thought maybe this guy could help people try to figure out what the Democratic Party stands for, and stuff like that. But so if I bring on a partisan, I will, bring it on that way. But most of the people I'm bringing on are as neutral as I can find. I'm reaching out into academia. Frankly, academia is obviously filled with more liberal-minded people. But, I have pretty good confidence that especially political scientists are still going to try to be pretty neutral in their, when they're presenting it back to people. Like, even if they might vote more on the left side, they're still more centrist than like far left. And also I do explicitly go out of my way, because in academia, trying to find people that lean right is a little hard. Every time I find one, I really add them to my Rolodex and make a good connection there. That luckily I have folks that will answer my email and get back to me that can give a more, more on the right leaning side, even though they're in academia. And that's a piece of what we even did an episode about that, the sort of, a bias in academia, right? And it's not, and I don't present it as like there's some, Mr. Burns in the sky telling everybody that it has to be this way. It's just the way it kind of goes. Like, that's kind of, if you're a right leaning person and, and you kind of are thinking about journalism, you're probably not going to go that way because it just doesn't, it's not as interesting to you. So we just don't find as many right leaning people in that space. I don't think there's a active, conspiracy out there to not let right-leaning people into some of these fields.
I think majority of people know that I'm conservative. I don't hide the fact that I'm a conservative. And I think I'm 63, so I think for 50 something of those years I've said the same damn thing. I'm socially liberal and I'm fiscally conservative. I mean, I because I came up, I graduated high school when Reagan was inaugurated, and we watched it in our civics class. I had a great civics teacher. We watched him being sworn in, and I just, whether you like Reagan or not, I liked a lot of his philosophy on things, and it's just stuck with me. But I've always been very socially liberal. But so when I can reach out to, I've had a number of politicians come on, join me that are from the Democratic Party, because I think a lot of true Democrats now are a little concerned themselves. They're like, "Ooh, we've kind of like really slid, so far left, we're scaring people away a little bit." So I want to hear what they have to say. But so how are these guys building bridges? I mean, how are these people trying to reach both sides and go, "All right, you guys, if we're going to survive as a country, we need to figure out how to, you know, find some peace here." So how are people doing that?
Yeah, there's lots of different, specific things that people are doing. I would say that breaks into a couple of major groups. One is folks primarily working on sort of dialogue and conversation, right? In their living room conversations is a group. Braver Angels is a group. That group I mentioned, Crossing Party Lines, is a group of that, where they're kind of trying to teach us the skills of how to have conversations with people that have differing views than you, and just make it more natural and us more effective at it. So there's a whole world of folks looking at primarily that kind of civil dialogue and effective discourse, effective disagreement, because it doesn't mean people are going to agree. It's effective ways to get in a room with people you don't. I mean, like the founders of this country didn't agree with each other. Like, they were able to get in a room and fight over stuff and come to compromise. And so it's kind of teaching us about that kind of stuff, and that those kind of things are out there. So there's a whole space kind of doing that. And there's lots of areas to that are actually really cool, and all kinds of stuff going on. I would say the next phase, and some other work people are doing, is more about bringing people in service together in some way, right? So it's typically working on projects together and bringing people from a, there's a lot of these kind of things out there, but Rich Harwood has one called the Harwood Institute, and it's just one example of this kind of thing where they go into a community and they bring people together from the community, and this would be, politically, whatever diversification they have in that community. So it would be people on the left and right and center, and then they try to arrive at some problem that they've identified together, right? So now they've identified a problem together, then they put together, a plan to sort of go work on that problem. So now I've got people that disagree about things, vote differently, things like that, but we've agreed that there's this one problem we want to work on together, and they'll do that kind of thing where we spend time together actually doing things, which we find a lot of the research is showing that's a lot more effective. I mean, I think I think something like civil service is another example of that, right? People that go out and do go do Homes for Humanity or whatever it's called, and projects like that where they go out in service and work in a real community with other people you don't know, kind of like the way the military would just throw people together. I think those opportunities have also shown to really affect people's lives. Like if you do that when you're young, that can have a lifelong impact on you for just, knowing, appreciating the humanity in people that think differently than you, and also just having some of those skills of talking with and working with people that think differently than you. So that's another category. And then there's others doing some interesting things in sort of trying to solve more that I would say work on things like more like political reforms and stuff like that, right? So things like ranked choice
Term
voting,
limit. How about term limits?
maybe term limits. People working on whatever they think are the kind of reforms that we need. But also associated with that is in a coalition building way, so not in a partisan way. And one example that I think is pretty cool is this tool you can go online called Bridge Grades. And what Bridge Grades does, and I've seen some politicians that really get this, and talking about like Democrats being nervous, I think this is a space where I think a lot of Democrats are getting it because when Trump's not a particularly popular person, and neither time was he particularly popular, right? But as low as his popularity is, like people still weren't willing to vote for Democrats, right? So that says something. If you're you better look in the mirror if you're on the Democratic side, right? And I think a lot of them are. But so this bridge grades thing is kind of cool because what it rates Congress people on and senators, what it rates them on is their willingness to work across the aisles, right? And willingness to work with people on the other side. And so it gives them like an A to I think there's there's A's and B's, and then I don't know, C's and F's or something like that, right? So you're either a bridger if you have an A or B, or a divider, they call it, if you're a C or an F. So in other words, if you're an F, you're like never, sign on to things by the other side or anything like that. And that's what's creating this problem, right? If you, that we talked for a second before about the sort of founding fathers and how they got together and had to do compromise. Well, that's how Congress is supposed to work too. I'm sorry, this whole idea we're going to fight our thing and never compromise. It's like that's the whole opposite of how it's. That's why nothing ever happens, because they just fight. Or it's also why when stuff does pass, the next Congress comes along and just flips it, right? They just reverse it. So the stuff doesn't last because it didn't have a good, a solid coalition to begin with behind it. And so anyway, so these guys look at that. So you can go to that page, look up your representative, and say, are they a bridger or are they a divider? Right? Are they willing to go
Oh,
work?
I know what my representative is.
Yeah, mine too. Yeah, mine too. But you can see the ones that are, and and one point about that is you find the ones that are kind of the ones that nobody's heard of, right? It's the
Yeah.
the loudmouths that are the ones that are the dividers, right? That's the ones who get all the attention. But there are people out there quietly doing good work, and we just, again, it doesn't make the news, like they're the quiet ones. But so I would say that's some of the main sort of categories of kind of space people are working on, and some of it is also just skill building, in terms of, how does conflict management work, and how does conflict resolution work and things like that. Because, again, we're not often trained these skills. Like it's not natural to deal with conflict, right? It's not necessarily just innate in us as humans. You have to kind of learn some of these skills.
Uh, well, that's a fascinating little app there, or page, or whatever that thing is, a bridge, because I mean, most of us do know. I mean, but that's how crazy it is. I mean, you could be against your representative and go, this guy or this gal, are you kidding me? Complete madness.
Yeah.
But you vote for him anyways because like, I don't know what the next guy is going to be like, right? So these people just stay in for 1,000 years. I literally think a lot of these people died like 5 years ago and are still being reelected. I mean, Mitch McConnell. Is Mitch McConnell honestly still alive? And
One
I
has
want
to
to see
ask.
him. Yeah, I want to see him with Maxine Waters' wig. I think those two should change personalities. Um, but it really is bizarre how that works. And I just think I'm not picking on the Democrats, you guys. But honestly, when you sit on your hands for a child with fighting brain cancer, you just don't look great, or you're all for Ukraine, you're all wearing your I'm for Ukraine buttons. I got my flag, I got me my Ukraine button. And then a mother stands up whose Ukrainian immigrant daughter was slaughtered on a subway. And you can't acknowledge the woman's grief by standing up and acknowledging her. And you just think to yourself, is this really what you want to project? And again, not picked on Democrats, just Republicans are just as a complete disaster. But I think of these politicians when they go up and they grandstand and they say the most stupid, outrageous stuff in the world, think they're pandering to their constituents. And we all look at them like they're freaking idiots. It's like, dude, is this really what you think we want you guys doing up there? It's just so bizarre. I mean, on both sides. I'm adamant about both sides. I just think we should have the tightest term limits you've ever seen in life. You should have like 4 weeks, and then you're out of there, right? But because you can't stay in a position that long and not somehow get altered. And I think that's what happens to good people go in and they just get altered. They're there too frickin' long.
Yeah, I mean, there's some, a lot of people don't know about California. I mean, you do because you're out here, but a lot of people don't know about California. Is it's a lot more, there's a lot more red in California than people think, right? I mean, there's a Central Valley, and a lot of farmers. And, even if it's not full on red, there's a lot of conservatives, and they call it a lot of these areas. They call it, what do they call it? The Valleycrats, right? They actually want people that are going to speak to them, and they don't really feel like either party's covering them very well. So they will vote Democrat. They probably more often vote Republican because currently the Republicans are, speaking to their issues closer. But they will vote Democrat if that Democrat's willing to, sort of answer to their requests, their needs, and um, and so those kind of Democrats exist, out there. Just as an example, I mean, you have the same kind of thing happening, I'm sure, in some red states that have kind of more purple or blue areas where there's Republicans that are speaking to their representatives that may be different than sort of the official party line, right? Like they're, and so you're seeing this movement, I think, on both sides, but I'm more aware of it because we have a Democratic Congress out here, and or I should say, the state government is all very much Democrat controlled. But you're seeing these Democrats with, kind of fighting their own party about these things, saying, "My constituents don't want this." Like, I don't need to be in lockstep with the party on everything. Like my constituents don't want this, and this is what we need to get more comfortable with. Is like our that, you know, and to your point about, do we want this? I mean, this is my challenge. I kind of wonder, because it seems like we're the ones who ask for this. We keep voting these people in. We're the ones who keep giving them, bonus points. They're the ones who get on TV. They're the ones who get the media and stuff because they're of these outrageous things. So it's kind of on us. Like we need to start somehow finding these ones that are the quieter, politicians that you don't hear about, that are out there working, like getting work done. They're not fighting, they're working. That kind of thing, right?
And I think that
It's
that
on us a
that
little
that
bit.
comes down to you have to stop this nonsense like vote blue no matter who.
Right.
It's like, well, wait a minute. Because if you vote the person and not the party, you know, there's a lot of really smart Democrats out there, believe it or not. And there's a lot of smart Republicans out there, believe it or not, um, that won't get a shot in California. It's just impossible. You just flat out will not get a shot in California if you're a Republican, and it's only going to be worse now that with the Prop 50 was gerrymandered. But so it's really difficult. I think people need to go back to, when you have the term limits and you're getting fresh blood more on a regular basis and you're not gerrymandering yourself into the same position every election. My people hate me, but I'm going to jerry rig it so I can still stay in power, even though I'm not doing anything. My people don't like me. And you just have to start voting for the person. who's bringing something that affects your life, and your family, and I I think maybe that starts building bridges too. It's like, hey, I'm a Democrat and I voted for that Republican because I believe that guy's going to do some good stuff for us, and he only has a short period of time. So if I made a mistake, hey, he's gone. But but I just this whole tribal, like you said earlier, we have to only stick to our party, and no matter what the other side's doing, we're gonna fight against it, whether it's good for the country or not, we don't care. It's just bizarre. It's just it's gotten to the point where it's absolutely stupid at this point.
Yeah, and we're falling into it, and there's a bunch of incentives, right? There's people that win in that environment, right? I mean, there's one thing I always talk about how if there's one thing Democrats and Republicans can agree on, like they don't want a third party, they don't want to make it easier, they don't want any changes to it, right? So
Right.
they'll both fight over that together. But and I think that's we talked about the sort of another lane that's kind of adjacent to this bridge building thing. Are these people looking at things like those kind of reforms, right? So there's campaign finance reforms and all that, but there's also things like trying to change the way it works so that there's more access for third parties, there's more opportunities for third parties, and like California and many other states have like you can't vote in the primary unless you register for that thing and stuff like that. So kind of open primaries, stuff like that, to where it is easier to do split tickets, right? I mean, and also, again, it's on us a little bit to make that more normalized. Like you should not have to get fired from your job because you voted split ticket. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Well, is there any light at the end of the tunnel, or is it just a train?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's definitely this is work. I talked to one of the experts that's been in this work for a long time, Peter Coleman. And I asked him some of these kind of questions, and he's like, "Well, it's not necessarily feel good work. You know what I mean? It's a lot of work, and it can be difficult to feel like you're getting anywhere. But I think part of what gives me hope is just the fact that there's so many people with good motivation, and they're smarter than I am out there looking at these things, and that gives me some hope just in that there's people that recognize that these are problems. It doesn't have to be this way. It shouldn't be this way. It's not good for us to be this way. And so they're trying to find ways to help educate us and give us tools to get out of it and stuff like that. So that's the one place where I get the most hope. And there are some definitely promising things out there. I mean, I think, some of the people doing work with deliberation, if we can get that out there better, like you're talking about, you're kind of on the whole term limit things. There's people that are really married to some of these election reforms, and if some of that can happen, so I think all of those things can help. But it still can be tough because it can feel like you did a lot of work, and then you'll kind of tune into Facebook and you'll see how people interact with each other, and you go like, why am I even doing this?
Why? Why? The thing is, like I tell everybody, I go, "Hey, man, they're not gonna term limit themselves, all right? The
Right.
gravy train is way too tasty. They're just not. I was shocked when Dan Crenshaw, is that the dude with the patch? Is it Dan Crenshaw?
I don't remember. I know who
Yeah,
you're
he
talking about, but
just
yeah, I can't remember his name. Yeah.
yeah, he just got booted out. He didn't win his primary in Texas, and he was like the great white hope when he was coming out. He's got the patch with the American flag on it. He's like the war hero, and everyone was all behind him. Well, it turned out the dude just became an insider trading piece of poop, who just it's like, wow, how does that happen to you have your hope set on good people.
Right.
Um, and it's really tough because it keeps it keeps the really good people out, right? It's like, who on earth wants to run for office if you've got some knucklehead with a ton of money behind him because he's going to play the game, right? And he just trashes you with all these ads and all this crap and digging through your life. It's like, look, I just want to be a public servant and try to do good for a couple of terms and then get the heck out of there. But I'm not gonna put myself through this. I'm not gonna put my family through this. And I think it keeps a lot of really good people out of getting into politics too.
Yeah, I mean, when these small races, the millions of dollars are being spent to get a school board seat and stuff like that. I mean, that's things are broken.
Yeah, it's a bizarre thing. So, well, David, I'm grateful that we made it. I love what you're doing. Like I said, I watched a bunch of your stuff, and I felt they were all really fair, down the middle, weren't flamethrowers. You guys weren't doing anything as far as just trying to stir stuff up. Because it would be wonderful if we could all find some common ground. Um, but before we go, I do have one last question, and it's not really about anything in particular. But if there's a last thought you'd like to leave us with, a last saying, a last thought, a quote, just something that you've learned while you're doing this Outrage Overload podcast, what would that last thought be you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, I don't have a fancy quote, but I will say, I think if you're stressed out about a lot of the things going on out there, and it's a stressful world. It's a scary world in a lot of ways. I mean, all I can say is, really concentrate locally. Think of your family, think of your neighbors, think of your close friends nearby, and don't put all your energy into what's going on in Washington.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. And like I've told my kids since they were very little, I said, guys, pick your battles. Choose your battles. You can't fight every stinking battle. Choose your battles. Pick something that truly means something to you and fight like hell for it. But to just have your hair on fire and go from one to the other because you think you're fighting the man is craziness because there's just no such thing.
Right.
There is no man. There's just this big ass machine that we all need to come together to put back in the bottle, right? Because really, this government is completely out of control, and it's not going to fix itself, right, David?
Right. No, I mean, we have to realize we are the government at the end of the day, right? We're it. We're going to have to make it be the government we want.
Yeah, somehow, some way. So, all right, buddy. Guys, you've just been blessed with a little bit of time with David Beckmeyer. He is the host of the Outrage Overload podcast. So, David, what else do you have cooking, and how do we find your podcast, and where do we get more David Beckmeyer?
Well, you can find out about all the work we do at outrageoverload.net. And we have a Substack, and we have a couple of different podcasts, and we also do host some events, and we participate. We're a member of the Democracy Group out of Penn State University, and so and all my contact info is there as well. And as you know, and as a podcaster, we love hearing from people. So always open to any conversation. There's even a place you can set up a one-on-one chat with me if you'd like.
That's awesome. Good, good, good. Good work. We certainly need it. We need some more bridge builders because this thing's off the rails. It'd be nice to get a little more control and also be able to go back to some civil discourse with people.
Yeah, I hope
So
you're
it
able to
just,
do that with your family members that you're having trouble
oh,
with.
Alan Castillo, if you're out there, um, my friends who listen to me laugh. No, honestly, it's just one of those things where I love him. He was my first wife who passed away. They were cousins. And it's just funny, I'm just not sure why he's so angry. Every time I ask him, he just gets angry. So, Alan, just chill a little bit. Start building some bridges with David. I'm not going to edit that out. I don't even care. David, you've been awesome. Everyone, please go to Outrage Overload Podcast. It's really good stuff. They're doing great work. So, thank you, David. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Gary. Enjoyed speaking with you.
You got it. See you guys.